Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming in early this morning. I appreciate it. Just to give you some sense of the day today, we will be meeting today until we finish this. We have floor at 1, which is going to be, well, according to Betsy Ann, about 3 hours. Could go longer, could go shorter, don't know. If we don't finish this morning, we will be coming back. I will give you a dinner break. If we, looks like we're going to go into the evening, we'll have, a dinner break and then we'll come back. And we may or may not be able to have Katie at the end of the day. I haven't checked her schedule. So I really would love, and I know that there's a lot to get through this morning, but I really would love if we could quite possibly get through all language on this go round in draft 4.1 this morning, so that Katie, who also has other things she's doing, not just our committee. What? I know, believe it or not. We feel like, you're just kind of part of the committee, Katie. So, but she does, I know she is working on other things. And so we have to be respectful of that. At the same time, the speaker needs this bill on the floor tomorrow, so that she can refer it to, the Appropriations Committee.
Oh, okay, so that's a day forward of what we.
Well, I said we were going to vote on it on Thursday. which is
Oh,
what I
okay.
said along.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry
So-
for being late.
No, that's okay. No, we're still gonna vote on it tomorrow, but it needs to be tomorrow morning. And so what I'm hoping is that by the end of the day, at some point today, that we have finished all of our edits and that we will have a final copy to look at. Remember, it has to go through editing and all of that kind of stuff. And then we'll take another run through it tomorrow morning, and hopefully make any final little minor tweaks tomorrow and vote it out in the morning so that it can go to the clerk's office and be referred to the money committee. Okay? Just so everybody knows what the schedule is. Okay, great. So, we are picking up where we left off. Which is we had just finished supportive services. And so we are looking at extreme weather event shelter. Yes, ma'am.
I have one thing about supportive services. Do we want to consider adding something about eviction prevention? Because for me, diversion is separate from eviction prevention. And I don't know how much of that is happening.
Okay, I considered it all part of that, but it doesn't matter to me.
Would that be part of full?
Retaining housing.
Retaining. It is.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I feel like we have it
retaining
covered.
housing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Yeah,
to her point, under number 7, mediation is that's more of a legal term, and what could suffice all of this is maybe using like landlord, the contact and education, or landlord.
I agree. Mediation is a legal term. And it's not necessarily the expectation that community providers do a legal function, but it is landlord-tenant relationships.
Landlord outreach and education. Landlord outreach and education.
It's more than that, though. It is sometimes like you're working with folks to develop their communication skills and work through conflict. So sometimes it is working with a landlord and a tenant and kind of working through conflicts that arise.
Solution.
Perfect. So in the family supportive housing notes, assistance in resolving disputes with landlords and or neighbors to reduce risk of eviction or other adverse outcomes. That's how it's listed in there. I don't know if we want all that.
No,
Yeah,
we
that's kind
don't.
of lot, right?
Assistant in resolving disputes with landlords.
Conflict resolution?
It's not always about
No.
conflict, though.
But I like the part about education and, because that's part of it is building that relationship with landlords and.
Eric, what did you just throw out?
Yeah. Say it again, Eric.
What do you call, landlord, just write it down.
Outreach and education.
Outreach and education, yeah, sorry.
Conflict resolution.
Okay, so landlord tenant outreach and education and conflict resolution. Yeah, go ahead.
Where are we?
Where's-
We are on supportive services, line 14.
Page 7.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All right, I got it.
So now instead of saying mediation with landlords, it's gonna say landlord tenant education and whatever I just said before, outreach and conflict
And
resolution.
education and-
Education and outreach.
And
Or outreach.
outreach and conflict resolution.
Yeah. Anybody else have any other suggestions on supportive services before we leave it? Okay. Thank you. Okay, and I'm not sure if it goes here, if it goes someplace else, but I know that Ann and Eric, I'd asked to work on some language. Is it,
I think
Does it go
it's
for-
in
you're gonna-
Katie's next, it goes in later.
okay, all right, so what,
And Katie has it.
okay, so remind me to
Yep,
call on you when we get to that section.
yep, okay.
Okay, all right, so we're checking off the supportive services.
Hmm.
Okay, extreme weather event shelter. Starts on the bottom of page 7 and
Mhm.
goes to the top of page 8.
There was, on top of page 8, shall prioritize funding under the section. What are we basing that prioritization on? Is it based on any data, any information? Just what is that based on? Is there something we can base it on?
And I have that similarly, how is that being done? Are they making a joint decision here? Or with the ones who
Actually,
might be presenting it, or are they totally making the decision? And we had also discussed, the second point is the issue of geographic access, so it needs to prioritize most impacted, but then kind of also needs to be attentive to geographic access, so.
okay, so who
Those are
has
my
it?
two.
And we're at the stage where if you bring something up, you have a suggestion to provide.
Well, to get first question, we're currently, I think, to a degree, rely upon DCF and the page on their website that lists eligibility categories, and it also lists by district. What are we going to do with that? Is likely going away.
This is a place where there's not eligibility.
Right, but I'm sorry, also on that page, lists by district office, which would give us a sense by region, perhaps how.
We have the data, that's not going away. We have the data on the number of people who are homeless in all the regions and yes, so that's not the intent that that's going to go away.
So can we just add shall prioritize funding based on current, you won't use current, based on available data from the department?
It's not necessarily going to only be from the
From the
department,
department.
right?
That's only, that data is only folks who are in hotels. It's not looking right now. Whereas HMIS has broader data.
Right.
Which we want to use,
So,
because there's like almost 30.
Community action agencies shall
something
prioritize
hundred
funding under
people
this section.
experiencing homelessness and only 1,400 there.
Right, but this is likely to be the 1,400 that we need assistance through the emergency, whether because.
No, it's actually it's actually
The other way around.
the other way around, right?
This is
so,
all the unsheltered folks who need shelter from emergency weather events.
okay, I'll throw out some language
Okay.
on both.
Shoot. Yep,
Okay,
go for
so
it.
community action agencies shall prioritize funding in consultation with available extreme weather providers. And then at the very end, I would add, and to consider geographic access.
It seems limiting to the current pool of emergency providers where the community action
Well,
agencies may look to build out the capacity.
But with available ones, in other words, ones that want to provide it, if they're looking at funding for a year, which is, they're looking at prioritizing funding as it comes in, this is saying they've got to consult with available current and willing partners in making that assessment. They can't be consulting with, there's nobody else to consult with if they're not willing and able to do extreme weather.
I mean, I'm not sure, like, I'm gonna trust them. Like, what if there's an extreme flooding in this area that may not be one of these big we'd normally think of, but like the rest of the state is fine, but there's this obvious need for some kind of shelter?
That suggests a role for like overruling that by the state, because otherwise you would think the caps and including potential providers would be well aware of that need. But if we don't trust them to respond to this unexpected crisis, then that might be something where there needs to be a safety valve of overriding by a state entity.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have a counter proposal. The community action agency shall prioritize funding utilizing available data under this section to regions of the state most impacted by homelessness, and then whatever you had about geographic.
And to consider
And to consider
geographic access.
geographic access.
Right.
I like that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about the first part yet. Sorry.
yeah, go
One
ahead.
thought, it's not totally pushed out quite yet, but, maybe this decision-making should be guided by the intent of the bill, so, effective outcomes. In collaboration with existing service providers who, in deliberations and discussions, like, ensuring that the funds are going to the areas where projects are going to get off the ground soonest and they're going to have the best long-term outcome.
And they're
So,
responsive to urgent needs as well.
Exactly.
okay, the community action agency shall prioritize funding in collaboration with community partners utilizing available data under this section to regions of the state most impacted by homelessness and to consider geographic access. So we've got collaboration with community partners. It doesn't limit who it is. And we have, because it could be a municipality, it could be a nonprofit, it could be whatever. And it could be emergency management. It could be another state agency.
And that available data would include the immediate data that
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
an
No, I think that
Exactly.
hits all the points that.
Okay, all right. Do you have that, Katie?
Nope.
Okay.
Collaboration with community
Okay.
partners utilizing data available under this section.
I think so the additions are utilizing available data and in collaboration with community partners and considering geographic access.
And I think the first two probably fit between
Across the
community
state.
action agencies before shall prioritize.
We're
Maybe
gonna
not, but I
we're gonna let
okay.
Katie figure out where the things go.
All right.
Because we'll be here for
I
24
was trying to
hours.
say
Safe. Do
changes when we come back
Come
and
back.
relook at it,
I
but
know.
that's fine. No,
Yeah.
that's good.
you have it now, Katie?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so the second part of the sentence, extreme weather may include time-limited congregate accommodations and may be provided through grants to municipalities or other entities.
So I did have one proposal to add to
Yeah.
that. We discussed,
You're being called.
oh, okay. I'm just gonna throw this out and then run
Okay.
right out. Yeah.
Okay.
That something about a minimum requirement for what you define as a extreme weather is access to referral information
When they're there.
Oh, yeah, making that connection to
Yes.
services. Yeah, no, I get what
We're
you're
not
saying.
saying it's gotta be case management, but that's kind of a minimum that there's got to be.
Yeah.
I feel like we say that under, we say that in here someplace about dependent upon the type of shelter. Case management someplace. You know what I'm talking about, Katie?
No, I've been writing the last.
Okay, all right, sorry. We say something about, might be where?
What are you looking for?
We say something about the level of service is dependent upon, would change depending upon the level
Yeah.
of shelter that people say. So I'm just wondering if.
Oh, there's
both
then language.
Maybe not, maybe that was
I
covered.
accidentally bumped into it. I think
Yeah.
you mean on page 17B. Is that the sentence you're looking for?
Just a second,
Top of
Okay.
page seven, which may vary. So they shall offer these services, which may vary, and one of the listed one is referrals to others. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Yeah.
It is also in 17B. on-
okay, thanks, on, and it's at the top of page 7, so I think we got it covered. Okay, so I'm checking off extreme weather event shelter.
Yep.
All right, okay, emergency temporary shelter. Does somebody have a better name? I know somebody talked about they don't like that name, or they think that name might be confusing.
Confusing
something
to the
around that.
current system if we're dividing off this with transitional shelters. So,
Well, maybe we just get rid of emergency part and we just say temporary
Yeah.
shelter.
I think that does it.
Okay. Got that, Katie? Okay. Okay, the insert phrase that you see on line 9, is, to try to reflect the, HUD required community planning process. Katie, explain why you didn't want to put HUD in. We just,
In general, we don't refer to a specific organization or entity. In general, we use a descriptor. Is that what we're?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
where we're at. I'm just wondering if it will be clear enough. Is that clear enough to the people sitting around the room and the table? Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I would like to have. What is temporary? Temporary should be like 90 days. We should have a number on it, 30
That's
days.
hotel,
45,
motel.
90 days.
We're going,
Anything temporary, it's never ending.
so,
But please help me.
yeah, sure. Part of what this whole bill is doing is saying, okay, what we've had, nobody is really thrilled about what we've had. Okay, I don't think there's disagreement about that. And so this is putting in place something completely different. So I'll just be upfront. I'm going to be reluctant to bring in vestiges of the current GA motel system because that is not what we're looking to recreate. So when we say temporary shelter, it's going to be incumbent upon the community partners to, again, primarily, hopefully, focus on the front end and preventing people from becoming homeless and assisting them as quickly as possible to get out of homelessness. But I'm going to really caution us about bringing in elements of the current GA motel program, because then you're just recreating what nobody really likes right now, including the governor, including people out in the field, and include, so this is I'm going to say it's a big step of faith in the community, where this is being set up to trust our communities to be able to come together to do the work and to prioritize where the funding should be used. And I realize that's a big change from where we are now. But if we start bringing in elements of the existing GA program, we're gonna end up recreating that in this system.
I think also. Sorry. No, Brenda had her hand up, but I just want to say, I
didn't see
think,
it yet.
I think also that section that Eric and I worked on that we haven't come to yet, that says part of what they bring back to us is, are there elements of, things that people have to be doing and so forth? I think that sort of covers, because an element could end up being for specific subgroups, depending on housing availability, like, what's available in the market. Some of the things that we were trying to drill down in over prescriptive detail could come back there. That's where that discussion should be, I think.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask for it in the hotel motel only. What the other agencies do would be the longer term. And I'm gonna ask for the 90-day cap just for the hotel motel. So there still is some emergency shelter. So that's when I'm gonna bring it up. Okay,
And this actually might be the place
Where it
where it
would
would
be
go. This is the place where it would go, Brenda.
to argue for as another sentence saying, if it is a temporary use of hotel motel, that I think you're right.
Yeah.
That's where it would go.
So now's the time to make your pitch.
oh, that is, I just sent everybody an email. That's where I went
Okay,
so I could do it right.
just look it up.
So I just sent everybody an email, but that goes under hotel motel, what I just sent.
Well, and the use of hotels and motels will come
So
primarily under temporary shelter, I
I
think.
didn't know that. Okay, so I just sent an email that I got from Miranda Gray. I did this and there was no rules and I had to sleep at night knowing I took somebody that had a dangerous situation, but back in the day, there was no rules and regulations. It was brand new. So let's say somebody did something dangerous. I had to sleep at night knowing I put them in another hotel. They just would call me and say they got kicked out for something. I had to put them in another hotel, knowing that, and sleep at night knowing I put somebody in with children and in a dangerous situation. And it was hard for me with my personality, but there wasn't anything. If they got kicked out, I didn't have a choice. They just say, move them.
Okay,
So that, what I just sent everybody,
at 8:46 a.m., Brenda, can you send a copy of it to Katie too? Never mind, I'll do it right here. I'll forward it.
thank
And
you.
also send a copy to everybody of the language that we sent to Katie on what comes back to us for guidance as implementation before the program starts, to see if it does cover what you're talking about in terms of what we expect to hear back on.
Okay.
What are the expectations that are linked to continuing shelter? Because one of them might be,
Misconduct.
issue of violence and so forth. So
Well, Miranda
send that
sent me
to
the
you.
exact language that they're doing now.
Right, and what, just to be clear, what Miranda sent you is in regulation, in rules. It is not in law. And so this
So
level,
it has to be followed, even with this.
a rule, okay? So, and we will be charging DCF with implementing rules for this program. After the collaboration and the communication and the implementation plan, they will develop rules for the program. And whether or not these are included will be subject of essentially the reporting back to us about implementation for the program. What we have is Brenda is expressing a desire. Let me put words in your mouth. To put the definition of misconduct into the statute. Is that what you're
I would,
requesting?
because to protect everybody in the homeless situation.
Okay, and then about a POI. I don't know what POI stands for.
Period of ineligibility.
Oh, period of ineligibility.
Thank you. I was wondering too.
Okay, and again, period of ineligibility, these are things that are currently contained in rules that are not in statute. And so Brenda's proposal is to put these into statute in this area. So has everybody had a chance to read them? Okay, and then Anne,
And to clarify, the sort of counter proposal, if you would be to, rather than being in statute, that it be part of what they come back to us for implementation in terms of what should be in rule, that they would then be putting as part of the protocols. And I just forwarded that language.
so look at Anne's language that she just forwarded.
Oh, thank you.
So what Anne is having as a counter proposal is that we have the implementation committee look at what are the elements that should be considered as part of their report back to us, and then what would ultimately end up in rule.
I like that.
Okay. I was going to
No,
say, I mean, I think it
As
could-
long as we protect people in the
yeah, I
program.
think rather than just saying household participation in case management, it probably needs to really be sure we're covering what you're raising, Brenda, or other expectations. Because that would include expectations
That's fine.
around
I
behavior.
like that.
I like that.
I don't have
And if
this.
so, what elements?
You don't have Anne's?
I also.
Oh, I sent it last night.
Oh, last night?
From 4:40 PM.
Do you want it at the top of your mall?
Send it to her again.
Yeah,
I
I
got it.
resent it right
I
now.
sent
Okay.
I have a feeling he gets a lot of emails.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
It was only sent to Kitty yesterday, it was just sent to us.
Yeah, okay. See.
Right, I just sent it, yeah.
Okay, it should be at the top of your
Okay.
box.
Thank you.
So what Anne is suggesting to incorporate both Brenda and Todd's concern is whether continuation in emergency or transitional shelter should include an expectation regarding household participation in case management. And then you added something?
And I still
Other
want caps.
expectations, or other
Or other
expectations,
expectations.
which would include cap.
I'd rather have the number in there.
We're not going to put a number in the bill. We can have we can say whether or not there would be caps on the utilization of the number of hotel days per individual or something if you want, but
Right, as part of, yeah, I think you meant a number like 8, not maybe. And now I forwarded, because I forwarded the same things to Katie, there's a second one there, which is not the current discussion, but was part of yesterday's discussion also about financial participation being part of what they look at and bring back. But it could be, or other, what did I say, other participation, could say
other considerations.
other considerations,
Yeah.
including caps, as something that they're gonna consider.
Something where they have, because right now I see agencies' hands tied. Where if they do, there's a reason that somebody should only be in there 80 days, let's throw a number out. They can say, okay, your time's up. So how can you put that in the word?
Well, the wording would,
To cover the person doing the intake.
again, that I believe it should come back as what they propose as including in the rules. And so we're not going to be specific because we're saying come back with a recommendation. But we can say including consideration of caps. That what we want them to consider that in what they bring back, whether there should or shouldn't be caps.
I don't know. I just see us as tying hands, agencies' hands.
So
That's what I see.
I understand what you're saying. And I actually think it does the opposite. I think it gives the maximum amount of flexibility to work with a household. But Lily has a comment in that I just need to let people know I need to go downstairs briefly for a bill introduction and corrections and institutions, and I'll be right back, but.
I just as well, but I just wanted to reassure what you do, for instance, in the hot standards, you guys, have behavioral expectations and there's rules that people are gonna have a late state policy, like what has to be in it, so.
But that's not in this is a whole new system.
Yeah.
We don't cross-reference that might be part of this.
Right, I think,
That goes away, yeah.
right, but I
Talk
think
about
your,
using those in the plan.
right, I think your proposal, I guess I would think I don't know that you need to be overly specific, because I do think that then there are ways to incorporate that as you were suggesting.
Okay. Does that help, Brenda?
No, so let's throw something out there. Let's say I used to have social workers call me. I actually knew her personally, but she would call me personally and say, I have somebody, I want to discharge today, but I can't discharge her till you give me a room. Are there going to be rooms available?
Well,
If with no cap, are there going to be rooms available for that person?
I think that's exactly why we said, they have to come back with, that's another part of the come back with that we haven't gotten to yet, with how to prioritize if there aren't enough. And so I don't think, in terms of tying hands, I don't think we want to suggest that for everyone, XYZ cap would be appropriate. It might be really appropriate for some people. Look, if you have not started engaging in a plan within, X number of time, then, you should not be entitled to stay in a room when you haven't engaged. But for other people, like if you have an absolute cap and they're doing everything they can and engaging in all the supports,
Then they
there's
could have
no
a-
apartments out there.
Have a reevaluation after the cap.
Well,
And let
then
the
you wouldn't
person
call that a
decide if they've met their expectations.
Right, but that wouldn't be an absolute cap. And I think this is why it ought to come back to us in a proposed rule, because there's so many permutations that I don't think we can
That
put it
we
in
don't have the time.
statutory language.
So as I understand it, Brenda, as I understand it, we're not saying there shall be no cap. What we're saying
Right.
is we would like to hear, as along with the other things we're waiting to hear back on, what would the providers in the field who are going to be executing on this, what would their recommendation be with respect to a cap?
Yeah,
And then we can act upon, during our
Those
review of the
recommendations.
rules later in the process, next year, we could review those and as to whether we think what they're proposing is adequate.
Okay, my concern is emergence, not having the rooms available with no cap.
I agree. That's a big
That's a scary thing. Correctional center would do the same thing. They can't release them from the correctional center unless they have a place to stay.
Right. No, I,
One guy took me 3 days because of what he was charged with.
but it's a
Find
big,
anybody to take the
it's a
person.
big, difficult balance that I have been pretty vocal about, thinking that because we sort of have some, if we have zero caps, then we're blocking other people when there's no capacity. But that's not what this proposal is saying anymore. And it's more saying, in this whole difficult balance, come back to us with how you propose rules enable and enforce addressing that whole balance in the agencies.
To everybody's point though, but without any type of caps or day limits, we're gonna max out the funding
Right.
quicker than it's
that's-
available.
But that's what we want to hear them come back with. Like, when are caps appropriate to preserve rooms? Because that is an incredibly important value. We don't want to, we say you're going to come back with how you prioritize. But if that comes back as we prioritize the people who are already in there and not having caps versus this list of critical needs and how important the need is, I think that's so complicated to work out. We have to ask them to come back.
But if we implement this program before that comes
It's
back.
not being
It's not-
implemented.
Yeah,
This is
we have
coming
a
back.
transition time before, so
Okay.
we're gonna get the report and the recommendations from
Okay.
the group before full implementation of this program.
Implementation is July 1 of 2026.
Yep.
This is the time to develop and come back to us with, here's more specifically what the rules are proposed to be to meet all of these things that we're telling them, look at and come back to us.
Yeah, and I think just one quick follow-up, because I do want to just emphasize, I hope they do come back and recognize the importance of establishing that capping day, because we'll burn through the funding a lot quicker than we were.
If we don't think it's satisfactory, then we have this discussion again and vote on, do we think it needs to be stronger?
Mhm.
That's still our decision at that point.
Absolutely.
But let's hear their input first.
Yep.
Yeah, I got the fiscal no.
Brenda, Dan, please.
Just an example might be an individual who, is, loses their housing, because they were there's an example of a person who was in a nursing home out of state and was getting better, but still needed a skilled nursing home care or skilled level of care to be able to live. If we had a cap and they were, say, in a hotel because we were waiting for a room at a residential care facility or at a nursing home here in Vermont, they might be in that room. They had a cap of whatever, 30 days. The room opens up in 35 days.
Oh,
Are you
no,
gonna ask that person to leave
no,
when they are engaging and they do have a plan to move into skilled nursing facility or into a residential care facility?
not with my proposal. Mine would say a cap of, wouldn't be 90 days with a reevaluation case to case. That would be my proposal. So in that case, they would be covered with my proposal.
So I think part of the measures is like cost savings is like, we want to take away some of the administrative burden that's happening over and over and over again. Like this is like, and people are in the same situation because the housing market hasn't changed. And so, in terms of like streamlining and cost efficacy and, I mean, the administrative burden for the recertification, for the financial checks, for the, are you applying for a job? Are you like, all that stuff, like the cost benefit analysis is not changing the circumstance that the person's in. So we do have to work on the systemic level fixes, which is housing, affordable housing, not just any housing. But I don't, especially if our intent, like I understand like there's scarcity in terms of shelter space right now, but I think, things are happening right now. There are more beds coming online, even though it's taken forever, especially because of all kinds of NIMBYism issues and all that. But it's happening. And so piece by piece, inch by inch, but really again, like, I don't think that these administrative checks, which is maybe looks like more accountability, but like with the criteria we've set in the motel program, like the folks who are engaging in that very specific program is a very specific population. And like, especially with the new implementation of greater engagement with service providers, which I think before we expected a little bit more from the ECF, but we had legislators going to the doors of hotels and say, have you been like supported or checked in on or whatever? And nothing. And they needed the help. So I do think rather than a cap in terms of trying to stop the problem and like people scamming the system or whatever, I do think that this process of engagement and like relationship building and like as we fix the underlying structural issue, which is housing, of course, affordable housing, and for people of all sorts of different needs and vulnerabilities. Yeah, I think that it just doesn't
It's also,
save money.
I think we're saying the same
program.
thing, right?
So, like you're conceptually, like this is the whole point, is it's going to look very different. It's going to be operated within the region and the community. So you're gonna naturally have a lot more than that, a lot more of that. And kind of basing your recommendations on what's happening now and your experience from when you worked there years ago. So I think also is just thinking about making sure what we're doing fits in this new vision of the program and not just reacting to what we wish we had now under this current system, because that system is no more.
I think we're all saying the same thing, but mine would be more of a check-in, like she said. She actually hit on it. If you did a 90-day cap with a check-in, case by case. We're all saying the same thing. It's just you're all set in your way and I'm set in my way, where they would have a check-in after 90 days.
I think the difference is, should we not put that in statute and wait for input from everybody before we make a final decision? I think that's the only difference.
Because I think part of the reason why we're asking for these, for this group to come back is because if you look at the membership of the group, it includes not just DCF, not just the community action agencies. It includes all the stakeholders.
That's why I wanted to put.
We don't have the expertise around this table on our own to determine those. So
it's never wise to put something like that in statute until you've actually had all the perspective, which is why we often do this in statute, where we ask for experts to review something and give it time over a year and really study it and come back with a recommendation of how it should be done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just add and finish. So if it is the check-in that we're concerned about for like accountability purposes or whatever, that is in statute. This is robust, like about our expectations for check-in. In fact, I think it's less robust to say, oh, I'm gonna check in with you like in 90 days because your term's up. Like that doesn't speak to like the.
And do 30 days.
That's, I'm gonna say that's not relationship building. That's more like, oh,
That's right.
you're like in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on because I'm not gonna change and you're not gonna change, so.
The Anne's proposal, which was including this in the recommendations that come back to us. So folks, we wanted to also add, Katie, did you get the things that?
This is the language, well, I've been trying to
Yeah, sorry.
work in what I've been hearing. So it would be whether continuation in temporary shelter or transitional shelter should include an expectation regarding household participation in case management services or other expectations such as night limits on the use of hotels and motels. And if so, what elements and what circumstances participation in case management services or other expectations should be applied.
So I move, I don't know, we need to move as a straw poll, but that's my proposal to.
Yeah, so everyone that agrees with, we're just kind of capturing what
Straw poll does resolve this section. Yeah.
Oh, are you
Around the
still on this?
caps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that language, what I just heard.
Yeah. So everybody in favor of that?
Okay, opposed? Okay, so that's
So we move
disagreement.
With that.
which goes into a section that we haven't gotten to yet, but that's okay.
Got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay, so we are, just trying to think,
Maybe around.
yeah.
We're still, yeah.
I don't think I ever got the answer. I was looking for nods about whether people understood what federally required community planning process means. People understand that. Okay, all right. So we'll move.
And I have another suggestion about this. Given the flexibility we want to include, I'm not really thrilled to say that emergency shelter is limited to those who are on the priority list. I would prefer to say something that they shall or shall serve or cause to be served at least or at a minimum, those groups. Because if by some phenomenal increase of housing and so forth, I mean, I think we want to help in the same way people who don't make that priority list, if in fact there was capacity and money. All of this is constrained to money available.
Okay, at a minimum.
That's my proposal.
So on line 10, Katie, it would say, after process, it would say at a minimum, households that are prioritized pursuant to section B. Is that
That would be
your-
that would
Okay.
be-
I just need to ask, Anne, you just said the word emergency and I thought we were scrapping. that.
Yes, I'm just using the old one.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
just-
I mean, that's.
Because it might make a difference on how you're thinking about which list of people. If it's emergency, that might be one, that you want to include everyone in an emergency situation. In a temporary housing, you
Right,
might
right.
want a different list of people.
That's why it says
Yeah,
that.
and I'm still getting questions on, and I'm not quite sure, like, the difference, like, what do we mean by temporary and what do we mean? Like, shouldn't all transition shelter be temporary? Or is there a permanent shelter? So I think the name is throwing people, and really what is the distinction between a community-based temporary shelter and a community-based transitional shelter?
I was really trying to, sorry.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was trying to drill down on the same thing and had some responses. But he said, Teresa should speak first.
Okay,
Just so to kick me under the table.
You already taking this.
I'm very grateful to have Ann at the head of the table.
Yeah.
So transitional shelter, and honestly, we called it permanent shelter, we call it transitional shelter. It is meant to be those established, and it's not, maybe just not the right name, or maybe we just write community-based shelters. They're the formally established shelters in the state that are there 24/7. They have bed capacity, they have they follow shelter standards, they're the other is really meant to be a more time limited interim.
Interim shelter, maybe?
It sounds temporary.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you describe is two separate concepts.
Yes.
And one is a building, a place where people can go, and that's
Yes.
a kind of shelter.
Yeah.
But when we talk about transitional shelter, it sounds to me like we're talking about the human that we're dealing with, moving them through whatever kind of shelter it is to get them to permanent housing.
Well, actually, both are true.
Yeah.
I mean, because we don't want them to, we don't want anybody to stay in shelter. So I'm open to suggestions about, I would just, so the middle one, okay, is not necessarily going to be an established building, okay? The third one is our established shelter programs that we have out there across the state and
It might have
every county.
expansion of, you know.
There may
but
be
they- but
There might be new ones, yeah, but.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
jump in now. So the two distinctions in support of that, I think, is that the transitional shelter does not include a statement about using hotel or motel rooms.
Correct.
They are the established one, although they can do master grant leases, but that's one big distinction. And then I think the other distinction, which would require a correction on line 6, is that because of the nature of some of those shelters, it's not limited to, it still has the old
Already out,
eligible,
yeah.
but it's not limited to priority populations. Because for instance, you know, various different shelters have different foci.
Yeah, we crossed out eligible.
Yeah.
Oh, you already did. Okay.
Well,
So that's for
Oh,
any.
I did. I'm sorry. I did in my notes.
Yeah, but I
Sorry.
don't know if Katie
Yeah, yeah.
has.
On line 6 on page 10.
So I think that helps clarify what the different intent is.
I think I had them backwards in my head, so I think it's,
Line 6.
I think I'm on the same page. I'm sorry.
So I didn't actually hear a resolution
Yeah.
to whether a different name would be helpful, a different title meaning would be helpful for either section 2207 or section 2208. Is interim better than transitional?
I think so. I think it would
Well,
help.
I'm looking to see. I know you think so because it was something you said, but
Oh, it was. I didn't realize.
well, so you reacted.
Sorry.
Is interim, I appreciate people having a sense of humor on a really day. I really do.
Could we get feedback from like Frank and
Yes.
folks around the room who are busy?
Does
Like,
somebody-
I just think like some are gonna have to change their name, just.
Not really. This is just a category. It's not a name change.
Yeah,
category.
it gets, confusing.
Well, I think what you
Interest.
Yeah,
That's what I'm just saying. I know there has been some confusions from service providers and about this
Yeah.
distinction. So I'd just like to hear if you all have any feedback
Okay.
or recommendations.
Lily had her hand up and Frank sort of has his hand up. Okay. Okay, and Amy has. Okay, so Lily, Frank, Amy. Amy, Lily.
I don't know that we have like a specific position on like what that name should be. I think there's concern about distinguishing between shelters that have like their own kind of space and their own operations and what's currently hotel motel, which is a distinct thing. And so if there's a way to.
We just,
And that's
they
how
are
it is.
distinguished.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is
so
what
that
that
is where
difference.
we-
Okay.
We just
Yeah,
want
the conversation, that was where there was.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's been in the bill from the beginning. So, okay, go ahead.
Amy Schomburger for the record, for VCAP. The concern that the CAPS have raised is, one, the way the priority list is now, it's really unclear how anyone would use that list. when it's eligibility, if you have one of those things, you're in. When it becomes a priority list, then someone is determining like, is a pregnant person more important than a person with a disability? And there's no guidance for that. So our recommendation is to move the prioritization process to the advisory committee. And then in terms of the shelters, not to be in conflict with what Frank said, but what the action agencies have been talking about is really, you are envisioning like really flexible funding. It would be helpful to combine those two categories and say the funding can be used to help people where they're at in whatever way they need help. Some people might only need a few nights. Some people might need several months, and being able to work in the community to provide that flexibility for people would be exciting, I think. Yeah.
And I think actually that's what the intent is anyway. So I'm not sure combining it makes it any more.
I think it depends on if the prioritization way it is. I think the prioritization with the separation is what makes it difficult to imagine how that would.
Well, so we're gonna move to that section shortly, and we're gonna have a lot of discussion there. Frank, and then I'm gonna skip over to Lily.
So I apologize, so this is specifically about the prioritization question?
No.
Okay.
It's the title of the two categories, and then we talk about doing change.
It's just one, like the kind of where the hotels currently is titled emergency temporary shelter. And then we were gonna strike out the emergency, so it'd be temporary.
Yeah.
And then the other one is just transitional shelter.
So I don't think that I understand what CAPS are saying, but I really feel like that the existing building-based shelter providers need to see themselves in this bill. So so whatever it is that we call it, I feel like it needs to be.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
We.
Yeah,
fully
I understand what you're
embrace
talking about.
the current shelter.
Yeah. Lily.
So is the goal for the temporary shelter that's where motels can be used?
Yes.
If not, right? So
Yes.
So the goal or the intent is that motels could only be used for the priority population. Is that really what's the distinction?
We
Okay.
haven't gotten to that section yet.
So, because I guess,
Because I think there's some, maybe, some different thinking about that, so.
yeah, because I guess I'm trying to think about it, not so much as like the bricks and mortar, the physical space, but like, is there a functional difference between the two types of shelter? Like, and is there, for instance, is one meant to be more of like an intake with intensive planning? Is one meant to stay, like, is there kind of, again, a functional difference? Or is it really more about you can only use the resource in a certain way for a certain population? Or some of the questions I'm trying to I see if there is like a functional difference to the two.
Okay, so, I think that primarily, we want to encourage, actually, what, I don't need to say it any better than what Amy just said, but we want to encourage, the use of whatever is the appropriate means to assist an individual. So, whether it's the things that are outlined in the temporary shelter section, or whether they are able to be referred to a transitional or interim shelter or whatever, just shelter, maybe that's called just community-based shelters, but they're all going to be community-based shelters. Was the problem with titling community-based shelter, because I thought about that too. The intent is that the community, the bigger community, are able to utilize all of these potential resources to assist individuals. It's not to necessarily limited. And so I think, we'll have a conversation in a few minutes about prioritization, populations, eligibility, that kind of stuff. And, I think that'll help us maybe clear up after we get more confused first about what that means. So
I wonder if then you have, it's just an emergency shelter instead of transitional, it's just emergency shelter. And then you have a caveat where the first one is almost like a subset where it's temporary emergency shelter. I don't know if
it's all temporary. I mean, you don't want somebody to live in a other
It's
shelter.
all transitional too, right?
It's all transitional too,
That's why I
exactly.
think-
Maybe it's
I
a
think
subset of one
combining
category,
it-
A and B. I don't know.
Well, I
Oh,
would
yeah,
just,
sorry, you were first.
Sorry.
I just think, having it separate confuses me because they're both, like, if we want the funding to be used in a way that is most flexible, whether it's a community-based shelter that currently exists, that is not supposed to be a permanent situation for anyone. Neither is a hotel or motel, neither is a master lease with a building. So having them separate just confuses me. I think, especially if we remove the eligibility and have it come back as a recommendation, because we want the community action agencies to use whatever is at their disposal, whether it's if there's a bed in a community-based shelter that exists right now, that's where the person goes. If there's no beds, then the person goes in a hotel or motel, if that's available. So I don't understand why we're separating them, because none of it is supposed to be, it's all supposed to be transitional to a permanent housing situation. And transitional,
Community. to meet
yeah, I
those
mean,
needs.
interim and transitional are like a bridge to that permanency. And none of these are supposed to be a permanent situation, even though
Okay.
some allow for longer period of times, right? Like,
Okay.
depending on the.
Okay, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing what people are saying. I'm also trying to be very respectful of the existing building-based shelter providers who very much need to see themselves in this bill. And so I don't think we can just like say, bloop, and lump them all together. I think that it could be an A and a B under shelter services.
Yes.
That,
Right.
Are all- they're all shelter
Between what
services.
exists currently. Temporary shelter, A and B.
yeah. I'm gonna move, because a lot of people have their hands up. I'm gonna move across the line and then come up this way. You have anything you want to say about that? What that,
We're in
okay.
the same.
Yeah.
Okay, Esme.
I think just quickly, like grounding us a little bit, I think the reason we felt so strongly about distinguishing the two in part was because we knew that people with very specific needs needed rooms. They would not survive in congregate situations. And whether it's for matters of electricity, or disability or whatever the case. So yeah, I think that since now I love, that we're saying when possible, please prioritize non-congregate situations, because it turns out a lot of our most vulnerable populations actually do better and have a greater ability to transition away from these things without it. So that was the focus, but I agree that it is less maybe of a concern now, as long as we're being very careful about highlighting the fact that people might thrive better in different situations.
Yeah, I hear you. Don.
So I agree with all this in the sense that if I look out 5 years and pretend that we have a lot more buildings that actually house people, the two sections might be balanced quite a bit differently than they are now.
Right.
And we might one day not even need the hotel. That'll never be the case.
That would be
But
wonderful.
in some communities,
That's
in some communities, it might turn out that way, or some.
It might
regions.
happen in some communities faster than others.
Exactly. And so I think that, yeah.
Yeah, Todd. Okay.
I like the current structure, and I guess I'm not seeing how we're hamstringing the community action agencies or others in the allocation of the funds and the way that they approach this, and whether they utilize the temporary or the transitional sheltering. So I'm not seeing that we're currently imposing any restrictions, and do like the distinction, and having the distinction with respect to the temporary shelters rather than putting temporary and transitional together may encourage new and creative thinking with respect to how we're going to support outside of the traditional brick and mortar. So that's where I would advocate.
Thank you. Brenda.
I'm all set.
Okay. Eric?
I'm good. I'm just gonna confuse it.
I'm confused.
Okay.
No. I'm not confused, but no, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have anything? Okay. Okay, so we have, sort of two proposals on the table now. The first proposal is to keep them separate the way they are, one for transitional and one for temporary. The second proposal is to still keep the distinction of the two types of shelter, but have them under one broad category that just says temporary shelter. And then there would be an A and a B, or however the numbers would flow. So who would prefer keeping it the way it is?
Emergency.
Okay. And who would prefer switching to the all under temporary shelter and then an A and a B? Okay, that's the way it's gonna go.
What would you be calling A and B if the title is temporary shelters?
Right, I was about to say, they should have then a bit of a sub-name, you know, maybe even just temporary shelters, temporary shelter through a community action agency, provided through, and temporary shelter provided through a community partner.
Well, we actually have community action agencies that run shelter.
Yeah, there's can be.
Oh, okay, all right, skip that.
So, I don't know, I'll have to think about that, Katie. I think that, if we have temporary shelter, I think we can go back then to A being emergency and then the other being transitional underneath it. Yeah, go ahead, Lily.
The overarching, the emergency shelter, that is sort of the national term, you know,
Yeah.
and then, so they're all emergency shelters, and then maybe again, you're indicating.
Temporary
Temporary
and
and
transitional.
transitional.
Okay, so total, yeah, go ahead,
Can
Brenda.
I say something? The title of this is an act relating to emergency temporary shelter program. So you're gonna change the title to temporary/transitional?
No, so now we're back to emergency. So we're back to the, so what would be, whatever the section number is, but on this version 2207, it would say emergency shelter.
Oh,
Then-
okay.
Okay. And
And there are two
A,
types. Yeah.
A,
207.
A would be temporary and B would be transitional.
Okay,
Okay,
not really, but okay.
They're both community-based shelters.
And they're both emergency shelter.
right. Okay. Now, okay, so we haven't changed any of the language in what it is and who it can be at a minimum.
Oh, yeah. We're in this area.
We're still on page 8. Because right now we're going to be talking about this eligibility or prioritization. So we're on page 8, line 17. Okay. And we have sort of like been moving back and forth. So we actually really are further ahead in the draft than it looks like right now.
Yeah.
Because this is a big decision. Okay, so what is in the bill now is, I think essentially what the current eligibility is for hotels and motels, for the use of hotels and motels. And so, to your, comment earlier, Anne, we have at a minimum that households. So, and we just heard from community action agencies, like this is a, like what, how would we determine? We can't just change the word eligibility to prioritize because it's not really doing anything without further guidance. And I'm not sure that we are the people to give that guidance.
It is doing something instead of being a bright line where then you hit capacity, nobody gets in. It's putting a challenge that I think has been well identified is inappropriate on the agencies to have to pick and choose among the priorities.
Right, and what I'm hearing is that they want guidance. Yeah. Yeah.
And I agree because the paperwork Miranda sent us. My concern is, shouldn't doctors have more of a guideline with their dry eye versus somebody?
Person with dry eye shouldn't have been admitted. I don't know
No,
if
there
they
was
were-
a law, learning disability in high school. Did you read them all?
Yes.
And another one was, yeah. So that makes it hard when the doctor is saying, this is a disability. This young person was aggressive and had a learning disability. Or this other person, the doctor said, this person has dry eye. You know, that is putting people in a,
Second, yeah.
do you want me to pull them up and copy them?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
All the committee members received a copy. of
Okay.
them. I sent them out to people a couple of weeks ago.
no, I got them.
No, I know, I'm just saying,
Okay.
I sent them to all committee members. So I just, one, we're not even talking about a form, at this point in time. And two, a physician can say, you know, whatever their medical opinion is. And I saw the same form, that person, I'm just saying, that person did not meet the eligibility criteria laid out here. Okay, so whether or not the people at DCF decided that they could go into a hotel or not, that's on them. It wasn't really on the physician.
That's what I'm saying. Do they have to take the doctor over a woman calling and saying,
We're not.
hey, I
we're
got
not
a
mandating
newborn
a
baby
use
and
of a
I'm
form.
on the side of the street?
Right.
Do they have to take the doctor's note first? No,
Yeah, we're not.
that's was my concern.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Brenda, I think I had a note on needing to make a change to clarify
Yeah,
that the description of the risk based on the disability.
yeah,
It needed to clarify in that language that it is the healthcare provider who has to provide that information. But I think the direction we're discussing now is this whole area of how you prioritize needs to be a recommendation back rather than a list that we're putting in.
because I would want the person at the shelter that actually has a physical, like be able to say, okay, I have a woman here with a newborn baby, then I have somebody with dry eye, put the newborn baby in.
But what they just said is they don't want to be given open-ended, you have to prioritize versus getting some guidance. And so we want them to give us the feedback on the guidance that they need on how to prioritize.
That's it. I think we're all on the same page. We want to take care of everybody, but.
Yeah, so we got to put that in part of the guidance.
Go ahead, Eric.
Prioritization and the eligibility, some type of verification mechanism would really help with prioritization
Yeah.
and eligibility with verifying through those mechanisms. That would be my suggestion for the committee to look at a
The
verification.
implementation include and how to verify.
Verify, yeah, verification mechanism,
Yeah.
yes.
I think we're all saying the same thing. It's just.
Okay, so so the proposal right now, it would be essentially taking out B
Mhm.
on pages, the bottom of page 8, all of page 9, and the top of page 10.
Yeah, because that's.
Yeah. And I'm gonna ask for Anne and Jubilee to work together to come up with a language that gives another task to the implementation plan. Okay, we have to be careful about that because
I'm worried about it, but
I'm
yeah,
just gonna say, I'm just saying, delegating some of these things that we really want to have in statute. Yeah, I'm nervous about that. I'm just gonna be
but we're
honest.
gonna
I'm
get
nervous
to
about
that
it.
section and we may have to drill down then.
I
Yeah,
don't think we can.
Okay.
This.
okay, so that's Anne
No?
and Jubilee.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're removing section B.
we're moving
and-
section
but
B.
It sounds as if parts of it will appear in other places or consideration of that will be in other places. Yeah.
We're
Well, we're
going,
gonna ask for feedback as
Okay.
part of that implementation before it goes
Okay.
into effect.
all right, and we have already dealt with transitional shelter. Katie, just making sure that you remove the word eligible on line 6,
Yes,
page 10.
but I've also moved that section into the emergency shelters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, supportive and shelter services. Oh, we've already talked about this yesterday. So in Katie's new version, she has incorporated the feedback that we talked about yesterday and that we got from the domestic violence
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah.
So
I do have a question. I just need to understand, is there, it reads to me as if, all right, we're acknowledging it here, but it's going to be taken care of in an entirely different place, an entirely different
this
way.
organization is going to, it's being reorganized.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
don't think it appears here anymore, does it, Katie?
2209.
The domestic violence
Domestic
piece.
violence.
It will be, well, now it's 2208 because you just removed a section. But it will be a standalone section. It will also be acknowledged as a subsection of the overall creation of VHAR.
Okay, I just am wondering if there's some collaboration that needs to happen, so there's some awareness for reporting purposes and so on.
It's a question that I have in my head, so like when we look at the current data of people who are in the hotel motels right now, there's a section for domestic violence. And as though, like, I do wonder, and I don't know if Lily, if you have any information about this, but how do, so we have people in the hotels that qualified under domestic violence. And then we have a whole system of domestic violence, shelters, and they refer to it as their hotel pool. So then why would people be under the GA program if there's this whole other system? Anybody have any answer to that?
In 3 communities in Vermont, there are not, what you just referred to as a DV motel pool.
Okay,
And so that is like the primary driver for those numbers. And that is one of the things that we are taking steps to address even this year in terms of some of the work we're doing with the network of providers. And then there are, I think sometimes there have been with the current system, some exceptions where maybe there's some sort of conflict of interest or issue with a particular shelter. And then we're working on a process with economic services to make sure the person.
yeah, I mean, we want to make
So,
sure that they get the assistance they need, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So with what Lily just said, do I understand that there's some part of this domestic sexual violence program that is not statewide?
Yes.
Currently,
And
yeah.
so-
They're working on it now.
So there's a plan for it to become statewide, that's somehow separate from all this?
Well,
Or,
so we're sort of starting to take, we've just separately started to take some steps to address that on our own. However, I think as written in H91, right, by having that statewide entity, it wouldn't be an issue and that just would be separately, like completely addressed. So
I'm just trying to cover for the people that are in the cracks.
Well, they're
And they-
covered now. It's not like they're not covered, because that's why we have people in the hotel program. There's like 49 people in the hotel program, 49 households.
That don't qualify for this because they're not in the right,
Qualified.
they're not in the right place.
They're not in the right place.
Yeah, I see.
Or there might be, as Lily just said, some conflict with
I see.
circumstance. So they're, to the extent that they know about the service and the supports,
Right,
that there is statewide coverage. It's just maybe not all in the domestic violence pool
Okay.
of hotels and shelters that they use.
So that's my reason for my question about collaboration, so that
Yes.
people don't get somehow forgotten or lost.
Right.
If they need to move from one place to the other.
Good point. And I think it's important to recall that we're now putting this under a statewide organization. So their role is to have statewide access to services. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, VHAR. So we are on page 11. The last half of this goes much faster. Let me get to it. No, don't say it. Okay. Okay, duties of community action agencies. And I do want to acknowledge that we have a markup of 4.1 from community action agencies with some requested I haven't had a chance to look at it, to be
Mm.
perfectly honest. So I'm gonna, try to do that, concurrently with, as we go through
And
this.
you're the only one that has.
Yeah, sorry.
It's hard copy. That's okay.
It's hard copy. I actually appreciate the fact that you took this, marked it up, as opposed to giving me a memo. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
that's easy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Amy Schoenberger, we have, it's a hard copy because my internet is out. I have an email. In section 2208, I know you've already passed it. The cops did raise a concern. They are fully on board with using the COC process. That is not the concern. But the concern is to limit it to only that. So we're suggesting instead of agree to as part of building a pond or something like that, so that if there's going to be partners coming in or
I think that's good.
just the like.
So in the current version that people are working off from, it's on page 8, line 9.
Oh,
No, it's on page 8, line 9. It's in more than one place, yeah. Yeah, to build on. Somehow, that doesn't make sense in the construct of the sentence, but,
Instead of agreed to,
right,
okay.
reaction to serve or cause be served in the manner,
In a manner that builds upon.
in a manner that builds upon. That's
In a
good.
manner which complies with, but builds upon, or complies with and builds upon.
We just wanted to make sure it wasn't limited only to that one.
I think we want to keep that it has to be, it does have to meet the federal requirements. So
Yeah.
that's why I was suggesting that
In a manner
complies
that complies
with
with and builds
and
on.
builds on.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And we just dealt with your comment on B. Yeah. Okay. So the same thing on page 10, as the vice chair just said. We were just, it's in both places.
Yep.
You have where we are, Katie?
Yep.
Okay.
Page 10, line 8, yeah.
Okay. Oh, look, page 11, there's no
Well,
markup on page
I have
11.
one tiny, oh, you're saying they have.
Yeah, they don't have anything.
I have one tiny.
Okay,
very
yes, go
tiny.
ahead.
So, line 5, where it's an or, I believe that the or applies to different types of things based on different types of needs and categories. But in terms of what the community action agency are supposed to serve or cause to be served, wouldn't that be an and?
Yes, I think so.
Not because I'm looking back and
It's
seeing.
on line 5 of page 11.
And, okay.
I'm looking back at it and I think I'm wrong now that I'm rereading it, because in fact, the entry is specific to how you serve eligible households. And it's by supported services, extreme weather emergency, or it is or. I take back my whole, just skip what I said.
Are we keeping eligible?
No, I'm
in
just, no,
these?
we're not.
Yeah, eligible.
There's two.
Eligible
places,
out,
right,
yeah. And we're saying precariously housed is now at risk.
Mhm.
And then the names will change here.
yeah, I collapsed
Oh,
on
I
the
did.
emergency shelter.
Okay. So keeping or,
What would that or are we losing a whole cloud if they're collapsing?
It says by providing supportive services, extreme weather, event shelter, emergency shelter.
Right.
where'd you see the other?
On, line 12.
Oh, thank you. Line 12, Katie, delete eligible. in line 18. Might have got this yesterday, local housing coalitions.
Yeah, I have that one.
Okay, anybody? Okay. Other,
Well, one tiny one that just, I don't know if this makes it consistent with something before, but on line 4, I think I remember somewhere the word throughout was changed to in. But maybe it's fine to leave it throughout here.
Oh,
you were correct.
yeah.
Where are you?
Line
Line
4,
four.
Yeah.
throughout, I do like.
Housed in the state.
I couldn't find it now. I don't know where that said it.
That's like a tiny little editorial.
That's good that he found.
That's awesome.
Details guy.
I know. Okay, so I'm just gonna summarize what we did on this page for everybody, okay? So on line 3, we deleted the word eligible because we're talking about priorities and that's gonna be dealt with by the committee. We, on that same line, we got rid of precariously housed and it's now at risk in instead of throughout the state. We say extreme weather event shelter and what's the category now called, Katie?
Emergency.
Or emergency shelter. And the sections reference will change, yeah.
2204 to 24/7.
And then on line 12, we deleted the word eligible. And then on line 18, we changed agencies, local housing agencies to local housing coalitions.
Right, I got it.
Okay? All right, I'm checking that off. Page 12. And if anybody needs to take a personal break or whatever, we're not going to take a whole committee break because it takes too long to gather us back, but feel free to do what you need to do. Okay, so, page,
I could just say at the bottom of page 11, I so appreciate the notion of plain language.
no,
It's being, or advising for plain language.
yeah.
I appreciate that.
Okay, now we are on duties of the department. Yes.
I had left myself a note, and don't ask me why, because I did this the other day. I put who, and I'm thinking maintain a website with the locations of all extreme weather. Who would maintain the website?
It says the department here. These are under.
Okay, I couldn't even remember why I left myself that note. Okay, got it.
Can I ask just a general question? I'm trying to envision the department shall have statewide responsibility for meeting the intent of this chapter. So how does that play out? They would be holding the cap feet to their fire, that sort of thing?
Yep, they have oversight responsibility for, really all the players in the system, as well as statewide planning. You just heard Lily talk about, okay, we have seen on an ongoing basis, we have this lack of services for domestic violence folks in this part of the state. And so we're doing something to address that. So it's looking broadly statewide and saying, okay, we know what the intent of the chapter is. We know what the responsibilities laid out in the chapter are. And the department is not being absolved of their responsibility to address the needs of people who are homeless. And this is really to make that up front and center, because that was, we received feedback from people. It's like feeling like, you're just putting this out and now the department doesn't have any responsibility. And I'm sure that the department does not feel like they're being absolved of their responsibility. So I just wanted that statement to be upfront and clear to people reading it. I did insert so is that intro section, we're going to take this in chunks. Is that intro section okay with people? Not hearing anything to the contrary, I'm checking that one off. Okay. 1A, adopt guidance regarding extreme weather event shelters shall be operated, including flexibility for regional weather conditions. So I did that because honestly, in Southern Vermont, sometimes like they get nothing, and in Northern Vermont we do, and vice versa sometimes. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like a one size fits all is appropriate here. So are people okay with that? Okay,
Just a question where it notes that when these shelters shall be operated, in the absence of any other language, does that allow the flexibility for the shelters at the local level to decide to operate at different times? Or is this limiting?
guidance.
I think that it would end up being a determination by the department whether or not it should be on the local level. So I have a note here saying, see page 19, and I think that refers to, is there a place where we should be directing a little bit stronger? Let's see, what is page? The implementation plan, whether in the implementation plan, there should be some degree of greater specificity about extreme weather shelters. And I cross-reference here per VCAP, page 2, March 13. Not necessarily in the degree of depth that they identified, but this is saying they've got to do this guidance in statute. But suggesting that should cross over, and that I think would be part maybe of what Doug is saying, with the implementation plan, providing a bit more detail about what that guidance needs to include.
So I'm going to move back to the comment shall. I think, yes, we do intend shall, because we do intend for there be opportunities for people to be getting out of the weather.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I don't object to the use of the word
Okay.
shall. Is that limiting in any way?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And it says guidance. Okay, it doesn't
That's
say
true.
rules.
That's true.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna check that one off. Maintain a website with locations. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay, good. Include as part of any, and we got rid of the word redesignation. Include as part of any review of a community action agency required to 3 VSA, which is where they first appear, the community action agency's ability to perform. That word is perform. It was something else previously, I forgot, but the requirements of this chapter. So all we're saying is there, if you're going out, you're doing your regular oversight, include the duties under this chapter in your regular reviews of the community action agency. Any problems with that? Department, any problems with that? Okay. Community action agencies don't have any comments there. Okay. Now, I have written down B beside number 3.
I have
allocation, we want to.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Allocation for-
Okay.
yeah.
So consult with community action agencies. And we need to insert the statewide domestic violence, however we refer to that entity.
And this is where I have a note about also, this is consult with in terms of how to develop that plan. I think we should be consulting with I think the department should be consulting with shelter providers as well on developing how those appropriate research allocations occur. Which then it ties to eliminating each community action agency from B, and that does not say it doesn't happen that way, but it allows some discretion. I have more rationales for why, but I won't go into them. People don't need them.
And I'm sorry, can you say that again? You're looking to
So
bring in,
3A, it would say consult with the community action agencies, comma, shelter providers, comma, and then however we need to identify the domestic violence piece. And then in B, it would delete to each community action agency. It would distribute funding using the allocation formula developed.
I guess I would raise a concern that dilutes
Yeah.
dilutes the authority and role that we're asking the CAPS to.
Yeah,
play.
it subverts the regional planning to me,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
Well, it
Amy.
allows the,
Just a second, just want to hear what you have to say.
So, Michelle, the CAP's concern here is the way we understand this language. This is the community action agencies working with DCF to distribute the funding to each community action agency for later distribution to the community. And they actually have a federal funding formula that is already being used that maybe Lily can speak to. That's what I believe the customary resource allocation methods is referring to in the current draft. And in letter B, my understanding here is if at some point in the future, there's agreement that the whole grant would go to VCAP, the statewide organization, and then get distributed to each of the caps. That should still be based on their allocation distribution formula and not in consultation with other community groups at that level. The consultation with other community groups, we believe, belongs in the regional planning section where that money would then be distributed by the CAPS to all of those different organizations.
So I would have to look at that, what you just cross-referenced. My concern is in that conversation, which I guess has to comply with the existing methods, but you know, there's the issue of how the funding gets to those components that are operated or caused to be operated by the CAPS. What is the mechanism for deciding those appropriate resource allocations? I think needs to be part of the discussion with developing them. And so how that's articulated and whether it's at this level, but if it's at the level of the regional plans, I think that's kind of too late because this is creating the system.
Okay, so let me maybe provide some okay. Okay.
Is there a time that's better?
Maybe if we can get through this section. If we can get through this section.
Okay.
And then maybe we will take a little break and then come back. That's all right. Okay, so let me describe what this is meant to take sort of the big pot of money at the state level. Okay, and say, a chunk of this is going directly from the state to the domestic violence network. Okay,
that's a separate
goes off.
thing
That goes off
yeah.
separate. And then, given all of these, the big pot of money, given all the demographics, the customary resource allocation, economic indicators, rate of homelessness, all of those other things, and maybe we put presence of existing community-based shelters or something like that in there.
Or just presence of, because it might not be existing.
Yeah, we won't use
okay.
existing anyway. It's intended to be the big pot of money. It is not intended to make resource allocation decisions at the state level.
I agree. I'm not
Okay.
trying to go there.
Okay,
I think where you just suggested including shelter providers
I'm
in
just gonna
that
say
list.
existing, I don't know if it's only shelter. That's the only thing, because there are other providers. So
All right, well, just providers, the community,
community-based providers.
community-based providers. I think that's my intent. It's not to,
Okay.
but because,
It does
it's
have to
sort of-
take into consideration the existence of those.
Right, and so what I would add to that is because it has to take into account that having their consultation voice at the table, I think would also be important. This is only consultation. And I think if our intent is still clear that the money is going to be coming through the community action agencies, but it has to account for, as we just said we would add, it has to account for community providers. So wouldn't it be important to allow their voices to articulate how they get accounted for in this resource allocation?
I don't think at this level, to be perfectly honest, I don't think at this level. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just wonder, like we're focusing a lot on regional, and not looking also like statewide and having that plan, because also the thing about people experiencing homelessness is they are quite mobile, and move throughout the state. And so I just want to make sure in that allocation, it's like also how those are, it's happening is also based on, yes, regional planning, but our statewide planning and how things may change as we develop resources. And that somewhere in all of this, and I know it's a fear that's been relayed to me privately by folks, is those folks who are fairly mobile and how does this work? So just, this felt like a good place to kind of throw that out there.
So you might add mobility of
Yeah.
homeless as part of that, take into account.
Yeah, I mean, we're not putting trackers on people.
Take into account, you know, the fact that that happens.
Just having a way to respond.
Yeah, I mean, the response would be
Yeah.
a modification to the allocation that comes. And when people say, we've had an increase here, and then there's data shows that there's been a decrease here, we would expect there to be adjustments. But that would happen. But I mean, we don't, unless somebody can tell me that we have actual data that follows people, you know, I know that I know, you know, people in Rutland think that everybody came from other parts of the state, or some parts of the state. And some of them did and some of them didn't, but same thing with Chittenden County. They will tell you that people came from other parts of the state because they wanted to go to Chittenden County. It's,
Once they're in coordinated entry, you can kind of, as they make contact in our work, you know, and services and information gets entered in. But yeah, I just want to make sure there is that flexibility to allow, like if suddenly Rutland gets hammered and over here, you know, in Addison County, we're not, you know, whatever, there's just a mechanism to make sure we're able to.
so maybe we say
respond
consult with
and meet
community.
the statewide needs.
Consult with community action agencies to develop appropriate resource allocations and methods for adjustments or something like that.
I'll throw something in there. When I had the house, the family of six, I couldn't find any place, so we had to take them by taxi or bus to another, like completely away from Burlington, because I tried to get adjoining rooms. It was hard.
Yep.
So they did have to go by wherever we provided the transportation, but I mean, I don't even know where I sent them. I just sat all day on the phone till I
Trying to find.
found a location big enough for a family of six.
Yeah.
And she had just had a baby. I remember right, Finley.
Yeah.
So sometimes that
So let me propose something here, okay? So to consult with community action agencies to develop resource allocations and methods for adjustments that take into account available data and the presence of existing community-based providers, utilizing customary resource allocation methods, economic indicators, rate of homelessness, et cetera. It accounts for existing providers. It accounts for adjustments.
I like what you're saying. I think that this good conversation that helps me understand, but the one thing I might recommend is, I think what I'm hearing people get stuck on is the idea that they're going to develop these allocations, and that's like specific money that's going to go somewhere. And so people are concerned. It is, but maybe what they really need to, what the state needs to be developing is allocation methods, a system for creating allocations. Rather than, it sounds like then the allocations. Are they going to be doing the allocations as well?
Well,
It's always based on.
It uses Formula and B.
Okay,
And
so the state, we in the
Yeah.
department, we appropriate money to the department.
Right.
So the department, yes, will be making the allocations
Okay.
out to community action. We won't appropriate that directly from here. We
No,
utilize the
it's just that.
administrative branch, the
Right.
executive branch of government to
Right.
do that.
Can you give that language to me again? I wasn't fast enough.
That's okay. I'm not sure people have totally agreed to it yet, but this is the idea. So consult with community action agencies to develop appropriate resource allocations and methods for adjustments that take into account available data and the presence of, I said existing, but you'll check it out, community-based providers, utilize, and then the rest of it.
To develop appropriate resource allocations and
And methods for adjustments
adjustments.
That's.
So,
that take into account available data and presence of community-based providers in the region, I guess, maybe like that. I don't know if you need it in that region.
Don't need it
No,
there.
Don't need it. And then the rest of it.
okay, and did you still want to add in the DV statewide?
Yeah, the DV,
Okay.
yeah. And I'm almost, so it's not confusing. I think I would have DV be a separate thing.
Okay.
I think it would just need to still be in that section because it all would be coming from the same.
Yeah, no, it's still in the section. I just mean, instead of consulting with community action agencies, it,
On that
And
part.
the DB. Is that?
that we had just added the domestic violence statewide, whatever it was called. Okay, just leave it there for now. Okay. I mean, not for now. We're leaving it there. Yeah, Ann.
So I like that language. I still, and maybe just end discussion, but straw poll from the committee on, I still think that consulting with shelter providers or community providers, in order for them to be appropriately taking into account, hearing that voice should be a part of it. So I'd just like to throw out whether people agree that we should or should not do that before we move on.
Okay. You have something you want to say, Amy?
Yes, Amy Schoenberger, the concern there is that if that is in the language, the concern is that looks like the regional allocation is being decided before the regional planning process happens. This appropriation is to the CAPS to then go to their region and say, how should we distribute this money? And we want the shelter providers to be funded. That's not the question. The question is, if they're deciding how each CAP gets the money with the expectation that the money then flows to that provider, it is subverting the later process in the bill around regional planning and agreement to how the funding should be distributed.
So I think the concept I'm trying to say it would not do that. The whole point is that the statewide view of hearing and understanding from those providers what becomes appropriate for the later regional discussion. But it's specifically because this is the only statewide level, and that voice should be a part of what that formula is going to be.
Okay, so we have a request to do a straw poll on the idea of adding other community-based providers at the top for the in consultation with. The language, I just want to reread. We're going to have two pieces. You're not going to be able to see it in front of you, so listen carefully, okay? So the language would say, I'm only going to read the first part of the sentence, okay? Consult, this is option A, okay? Consult with community action agencies to develop, consult with community action agencies and the statewide domestic violence organization to develop appropriate resource allocations and methods for adjustments that take into account available data and presence of community-based providers. And then the rest of the sentence goes on. That's option A. Option B is consult with the community action agencies, the statewide domestic violence organization, and community-based providers to develop appropriate resource allocations and methods for adjustment that take into account all the same things at this time. So option A is you're consulting with community action agencies and domestic violence because those are two statewide, options. the option B is those two things plus all the community-based providers.
Now, who would be doing that?
This is saying the state, the heading is duties of the department,
Okay.
okay? Who is in favor of option A? Who is in favor of option B? Okay, we're gonna move on to option A. Okay. Annually distribute on B. Okay. Annually distribute funding to each community action agency using the formula developed pursuant to A. Or if the Department of Community Actions disperse a joint action for all, oh yeah, that's for all community action agencies.
That's potential in the future,
Yeah,
right?
okay. Now, but this says in conjunction with their local. I think that's a mistake. That's not supposed to be there. Yeah, that's not supposed to be there. This language is only for, if the community action agencies decide to do with the state, they decide to go the route that we did with parent-child centers to do it to the,
Central.
central organization, yeah. So that's not supposed to be there. Okay, yes, Lily?
Oh, thank you so much. Just similar to A, if we could add in the domestic violence coordinator.
Oh, distribute funding too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we need to distribute. Yeah.
As well as.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are done with page 12.
I'm sorry. Just one word.
We are done with page,
Okay, good.
unless it's critical. Go ahead.
No, it's not critical.
Go ahead.
Critical. Last line, the word decide, I might prefer determine. No big deal.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's
A little fiery, yeah.
a little better.
So we take straw poll.
Let's take two.
All in favor of determined.
20 minutes.
Sorry.
Through the dictionary.
Okay. All right, we are now done with page 12.
Sorry.
Okay, that's okay. We need to enable Katie to go downstairs here momentarily. So, all right, number 4. The first part of the paragraph, first part of the section. So this is consulting, appropriate measures for accountability, evaluate services, department has to evaluate, effects on households, blah, 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 blah.
Do we want to add the DV folks here as well? That's not.
Yeah,
They have kind of-
accountability too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they have a lot of additional federal kind of things there and.
But they're getting state money here. so-
Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
know if it needs to be separate, but just
Yeah.
make sure that's in there.
Did you get that, Katie? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so is the first part okay with people? 4, okay, we don't have any comments from community action? Okay. 5. So we have comment from community action agency, provide support and techniques to community action and other community providers. This is about the planning process and convene community stakeholders.
And then
Yeah.
again, do we want to add DV here?
Yeah, probably under the department roles. Okay, so, provide support and technical assistance to community action, other, domestic violence network and other community providers.
I don't know, it says and convene community stakeholders. No, is it just to get them together? Is there a purpose?
Yeah,
Delete
actually,
it maybe?
this was and maybe, where does the planning? Okay, this comes up under the planning. So the intent is that the department will kind of roll up the local plans into a statewide plan, okay? So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that this goes here, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to
It doesn't connect with the other piece.
Yeah.
Should it be a standalone?
I was
subdivision?
thinking it should be a standalone if it was important.
Well, yeah, 7 has a part of that from too, if we're, if the whole first part is about,
I guess I'm a little concerned, yeah, we're not clear on what the community stakeholders.
Yeah, I don't think this is the appropriate place for it. I think what my intent was that we do want the department to be in contact with the
Mhm.
community and understand on it. Again, going back to the statewide responsibility, but I think that comes under, there's something here, that talks about rolling up the,
Yeah, and if I think.
But I would think wouldn't the CAPS be convening those meetings and we would want the department to be a participant? This seems like they would be granted some sort of leadership role in those meetings when they're convened, which I'm envisioning is the CAP.
this is all about what happens for this particular program. And I think maybe we need and maybe it's going back up, sorry, I'm amending my own rule, I'm going back a page. I'm wondering if we need a, intro under one, before we kind of like, launch into the guidance about the particular things. I'm wondering if we need to have a, general statement that talks about the department's role in statewide planning and, oversight of of the system of services and supports for individuals who are homelessness or at risk of homelessness.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And in this particular case, it's a culture change, overseeing the culture change in
Yeah.
a certain way, managing
Yeah.
that, the state, yeah.
And I think we could say in that, I guess we don't need to say exactly how they do that.
no.
Right, in statute, yeah. Okay, so you have the
I
general
mean,
sense.
I have the general sense, but I think you're just referring to the program. You said sort of like the system, the statewide system of supports, but the program is a statewide. So, which means I'm left with provide oversight of the program. Did you want more than that?
Well, it's not just oversight, it's planning,
Oversight.
statewide planning. So for instance, they're gonna have to work with people, like if they're seeing a big, I don't know, a lack of something or a need to, maybe they have some great new idea or something they want to implement and they need to work with people to do that.
Yeah, it's part of the purpose of planning, oversight and monitoring.
Yeah.
Statewide, that's something they should.
Well, and that's of the program.
Yep.
And I think this statement, Katie, is more generally about the system of care for people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. I mean, that's what this chapter in VHAR is about.
Is that getting beyond their responsibility for meeting the intent of this chapter? Which is that new first sentence.
And maybe we add a phrase that says, including
Oversight, monitoring and planning.
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna give myself an assignment to give you language about that.
Right now, I have provide statewide planning, oversight and monitoring of the program.
Yeah, well, that's what we say in the second part. We just don't have planning.
Right.
It's not just administrative, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Let me work on a sentence to go in there, Katie. Okay. We're back on page 13, line 8, we deleted convene community stakeholders, but we have added to section 5, domestic violence and other community providers. Okay? All right, so 5, we're checking off 5. 6, identify specific administrative resources that could be transitioned to community operations. Okay, all right. Adopt rules in consultation with community action agencies for the implementation of this chapter, including accommodations for individuals with a disability.
Should DB be added there?
Pardon me?
Should domestic violence?
Yeah, we should add DB, yeah.
So I think the including accommodations for individuals with disability probably needs to be sort of its own piece. I think throwing at the end of the overall implementation of the whole chapter, it makes it a little, but that's purely a structural thing. I also think that including accommodations for individuals with a disability is a little bit too vague, and I think it should say that at a minimum comply with the Americans with Disability Act and the Olmsted rule.
I philosophically I philosophically agree. And I am, to be honest, trying to remember, I'm trying to remember what,
Olmsted?
No, I know what both of those things are.
Yeah.
You're the portrait here. What I'm trying to reflect on is department's response to these assertions in the current program.
Right, well, they're still gonna develop the rules, and, you know, that'll fight it out in the rulemaking process with other assertions or whatever, but I think we want to make it clear that at the minimum, they need to comply with those.
It's federal law.
That's what I'm struggling with internally, because they would apply.
Regardless.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being explicit
Yeah.
about our
I'm
expectations.
just also thinking, like, if we put, particularly like naming a case one place and not everywhere else, where we would want Olmsted to apply everywhere in the VSAs, sort of begs the question for me, why here? Like, what's different?
It's different because we're telling the department that they have to include this in the rulemaking.
But don't they always have to do that in anywhere else in statute?
I mean, the reason that I included the phrase is because there's been significant feedback that the department has not accommodated
Right.
individuals with disabilities. And, you know, they will argue that they have, and there'll be you know, so it was to reference the
Right.
fact that we want to be explicit about the rules covering accommodations for people with disabilities. We can't make up something that does not comply with the ADA
Yeah.
or with Olmsted.
All right,
I'm
not a deal breaker. for me.
yeah, I'm just,
I would-
I'm just trying to
it would've
reference
been a
what
plus,
Katie is
but-
saying, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're adding domestic violence to that.
Okay.
Okay, number 7. All right. So now we're going to take a brief break so Katie can go downstairs. She doesn't get a break.
Nice sense.
Okay. So we'll be back at 10:45.